That matters. Fox 23 News at 6:30 starts right now.
Thanks for joining me at 6:30. I'm Rick Maranon. Tonight I'm speaking with Eastern Oklahoma Republican Congressman Josh Brecheen. He's joined what's called the DOGE Caucus, a bipartisan group of lawmakers who want to help Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy cut the fat in the government budget during the second Trump administration. As you'll hear, a lot of what the late and former Oklahoma U.S. Senator Dr. Tom Coburn talked about for years is a part of this discussion. Here is Brecheen unedited in his own words and only on Fox 23. How are you feeling about since post-election? I imagine you're gearing up for your first Republican control since taking office.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, the majority of the House now combined with the Senate and the White House is it's an incredible opportunity. And everyone is on a emotional high. And then I am optimistic and with the understanding that this has happened in the past where we've been handed a mandate. And yet I'm also concerned that we would squander it. And so I'm going to want to jealously guard the mandate that's been handed to us. And I really want to see Elon and Vivek's part of what President Trump advocated. I want to see that added to our agenda in the next 60 and 90 days. All too often people talk about efficiencies. They use the taglines of waste, fraud, and abuse. And sadly, both parties are minimal in their execution on dealing with it. And I'm hopeful for better things.
I was going to say, this is one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk to you. I don't want you to feel old when I ask you this question, but you're one of the few people who can answer it. When I look at Vivek's tweets and when I look at Elon's tweets, they sound a lot like your old boss, Tom Coburn.
That's it.
And what do you think Tom Coburn would say now that his concerns aren't just on the fringe anymore, but a part of the conversation?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I have somebody in the DC lobby crowd that sent me a text. We've never even encountered each other. And they said, when I think about DOGE, I think about it ought to be named after Tom Coburn. And so as I have had the chance to try to engage in person with Vivek and Elon, I have mentioned the 694-page report that Dr. Coburn's team put together in 2011. And that was the year after I left. Left his staff. I was with him for 6 years. And there's thousands of field reports and thousands of hours of work product. And there's some staffers still up here, one on the Senate side that works for a United States senator that have that type of information on their hard drive. And so in addition to what our budget committee is working on, hopefully that they can start with that, reverse the curse, which is a 10-year pathway to balance. My encouragement to them, to Elon Vivek, was please look at that 695-page report that's $1 trillion in savings per year. And that was 13 years ago. That number's only increased. That's when we were in the $10 trillion national debt realm, and we're 3 times that over now.
So you have been a part of these meetings with Elon Musk, and
I don't want to oversell my role.
That's okay.
I have dialogued with them when they came before the Congress, and am trying to do everything I can to insert myself in the conversation when allowed, hopeful that they understand they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And as I said to them on the microphone, the information's there. It's been there. We just have to have a spinal transplant to advocate for it, to actually execute upon the ideas.
You are a part of the DOGE Caucus. Is that right? So I've heard some Democrats want to be a part of it. Is this open to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, and look, I had a conversation with a former Blue Dog Democrat that was up here today with some Oklahomans who said, I used to, be in conversation with Dr. Coburn, consistently, and told me where he lived, and I know that he and Dr. Coburn are in communication. That was a time where the Blue Dog Democrat, and I would contend those are very few and far between, if any, left, true Blue Dog Democrats of what there were 10 and 15 years ago. He was saying, look, I can get you a group of 10 Democrats that think like Tom Coburn was thinking 10 years ago, that want to go after waste. And so this transcends party lines. It really does. But that's the entrapment in Washington, D.C. That's the entrapment, is people get here, and then the people that are connected too much to the lobbyist has a role to play in educating you. But when members get connected and they feel like they owe the lobbyist, that's where the thing gets perverted on both sides of the aisle up here, where they can't bring about reforms because they feel like they owe, loyalty to the quote, they think those who brought them to the dance. And that's the freedom I have. And I thank Tom Coburn for that. I didn't come to Washington, D.C. promising more government programs with lobbyists. That's not who got us to Washington, D.C. It was a grassroots campaign promising to make it right by every constituent whose every grandchild and child, and they themselves know what deficit spending is doing to their bottom line with inflation.
What we know we've been talking about the deficit. Do you think you can actually achieve a reversal of the debt? When will we actually see a trillion or so off the debt because of this reduction spending?
That's an incredible question, and people don't understand the math and how problematic the math is. Years ago, they were talking about a few years to balance. We're talking about now trying to, the most aggressive thing is the Republican Study Committee. And I compliment Kevin Hern, Oklahoma's Kevin Hern, and he's allowed me to be a part of his Budget Committee task force with Ben Klein. That's the most aggressive plan right now, and it's 7 years to balance. And then the Budget Committee's got a 10-year pathway to balance. I mean, it's a sad pronouncement to say we're not even talking about doing anything about our debt. Our numbers are so far off base right now that we have to have those type of years just to get to balance. And then, Rick, to your point, that doesn't even get us to a place where we can pay off the $36 trillion. We're in a big mess. And that's why it's so disheartening. I ran a measure last year on the floor just to try to return arts and humanities spending on the federal level back to 2019 spending levels. And no, I've got 100 plus Republicans who won't even support that. We've got to have a mind shift change for the constituency to understand. You've got somebody that was in front of our committee today, and this guy was respected, who says there's a 70, he's talking to, researchers who are saying that there's a 70% chance that they're doing odds, right? 90% of all statistics are made up on the spot if you follow that comment. But he's willing to go out there and say, look, with my resume, and he's well respected for someone that has implemented budget reform in the past, but was successful in leading an entire agency here in D.C. Actually did the deal. And he's got public statements saying there's me and some professors who say there's a 70% chance within 5 years or less that we will see an economic crisis in this country because of our debt. We're really on the precipice.
A lot of attention right now is on the Senate with the confirmations, but over in the House, do you all get legislation ready to tee up when the Senate is done? Is that what the first 100 days look like? You get the policies in place and they'll get the people?
The House has actually got a role that is heightened because of our narrow majority. And because of that, typically the Senate, because of their rules, gives them advanced placement in negotiations. The House is going to have advanced placement in negotiations because we've got to have, with a margin of 2, everybody on board in the House. And so we're starting, and some of the things I'm trying to impress upon those outside the building that would be connected to the administration, let's not lose the opportunity for reconciliation. And the committee I'm on, Budget Committee, that will be the committee that sets the dollar figure, that sends that to every committee. And reconciliation is the fancy way of saying it only takes 50 votes in the Senate, not 60 votes. It will be the only game in town to really get spending reform this year, I'm convinced. You got 53 United States senators. With the mandate that President Trump came in with, if we are going to have a chance when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extension is on the table, plus border, plus all the other things, the only way we're going to be able to deliver on addressing the deficit spending that is driving inflation is going to be in the reconciliation process. And that train leaves the bus maybe within 60 days. My hope is that Elon, Vivek, ultimately President Trump weighs on our conference and says this DOGE idea has to be done in reconciliation, because he knows that's where the pressure, the political will, the ability to deliver on it will come from, and his mandate being fresh enough before it wanes.
My last question, I know you were working on Healthy Snap, and now your Senate colleague is now probably going to be Secretary of State.
Yes.
Do you feel still good about getting that passed?
Yeah.
And who takes up that mantle in the Senate?
So, look, I couldn't be in a better position because that's one of the most common talked about congressional changes with RFK, Make America Healthy Again mandates. That one, when people are talking about what are some things we can do in Congress to deliver upon that agenda, that bill is one that's talked about. And Marco Rubio was the Senate author on that. And we had people, I didn't know this. My chief didn't tell me this. Maybe he was trying to protect me from the information. We had sizable entity, a large amount of dollars to throw around, threaten us after we put our name on that to say, we'll run against you. We'll make sure that you have problems getting reelected. That's the garbage in Washington, D.C. that scares people off of doing the right things. And so I'm hopeful. Again, it's a part of the mandate with RFK and with Marco Rubio going to Secretary of State. I've asked my staff, lean in with Rubio. He'll have influence. Who does he see on the Senate side that would want to carry this? I'm hopeful that bill goes somewhere.